You can go ahead and whenever you're ready.
Excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Wednesday, August 7th. This is our Q3 TAC Subcommittee meeting. Thank you guys for attending. For all of those who are here, thank you, and those who are participating virtually, thank you as well. We'll quickly go over some order of business items, and then there's already a packed agenda that I can't wait for us to start getting into. We'll start off officially with a roll call. Your kick us off.
I'm gonna skip 10, go to Helen speaking 10. I have Katie Malone representing the American Blood Coalition. She's on virtually. Kit Friedman is here, assuming you're for Jay and Andrew.
Yes.
Ben McFarland or with me, Catmark.
Present.
Oh, there you are. You snuck in, sorry. Brianna Heath is attending virtually. And then we have Eli here, and then Chris Berg is attending virtually. And then I have Rachel Peabody and Scott Whitehurst virtually, and then that's the members that I have. Did I miss anybody? That's a weird way to do roll call, sorry about that.
So we have a lot of folks on the line today.
Well, thank you very much. Okay. Second item of business is you should have all received the previous meeting minutes for the Q2 meeting for 2024. Hopefully you all had a chance to review that. If someone would kindly make a motion to adopt the draft Q2 2024 meeting minutes. So moved. Okay, would someone second that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of adopting the draft Q2 2024 meeting minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the motion is adopted. Thank you. All right. Do we want to do anything with virtual meetings in this session? Okay. Any motion?
Yeah, folks on the line, if you hopefully you're able to hear Marcus okay. Can somebody indicate whether you've been able to hear him okay? Just come off mute.
We can hear great, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Okay.
So yeah, folks on the line, if you can, I know we're moving fairly quickly, but participate in the verbal call when we make it.
Absolutely. And we absolutely encourage participation in this meeting. Hopefully everyone put in some good feedback and be a very collaborative.
So we just need to adopt the agenda. Call for that and then we'll move on.
Someone make a motion without the motion.
So
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favor of adopting the agenda for August 7th, 2024.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. The agenda is so adopted.
Wonderful. Great, thanks everybody. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive into some quick updates from DCR's side, some reminders about what we're doing here and what we're doing today. And then we're gonna spend the vast majority of our discussion and our time together today on recommendations development. So that third bullet under old business. Then of course we'll have our public comment and we'll talk about action items and next steps. So let me okay, on the side of the reminders, what are we doing here? What's the Coastal Resilience Master Plan? Just wanted to throw this up here so we can all kind of ground ourselves in the plan and the process before we dive into the discussion. As a reminder, the Coastal Resilience Master Plan is intended to be a trusted resource to help make more informed decisions to mitigate severe and repetitive flooding, really intended for a variety of actors across the region from different levels of government. It does this for providing this unified baseline analysis of the threat of flood exposure and how that is changing over time due to sea level rise and changing precipitation patterns, but also by identifying opportunities to prioritize impactful flood resilience solutions. So this plan, as you all know, needs to be delivered by December of this year, and then it is updated every 5 years thereafter. We've got our major plan elements include the flood hazard exposure, the impact assessment, looking at our planned resilience actions, which is those projects and initiatives across the region, financial needs for flood resilience, and finally subcommittee recommendations that we will be working on developing today. The objectives of this particular, apologies, just skipped to the final slide. Back up a little. The objectives of this subcommittee are to inform and support the flood hazard impact assessment, the risk assessment, inform and support the identification of planned resilience actions, and develop recommendations for future planning. I'm only going to focus on that third one today because that is really our focus for discussion. When we kicked things off with this subcommittee many months ago, we discussed that the recommendations should focus on areas including identifying goals and associated metrics for flood resilience, which could be used for project needs evaluation and prioritization, objective protocols for evaluating and prioritizing project needs, and developing kind of a process for accomplishing that. Of course, we are not, as a subcommittee, going to accomplish all of those things in the remaining 2 meetings that we have, but keeping in mind that that was a desired kind of direction for the recommendations can perhaps help us shape what we suggest in terms of next steps for implementation. Just in terms of our schedule, so this is our second to last meeting today before the plan is released in December. At this meeting, I'm going to provide some updates on where we're at with both the impact assessment and the planned resilience actions analysis. And then, of course, we're going to talk about recommendations. And our final meeting next quarter is in October, and we'll finish up the recommendations discussion then. So on the impact assessment side, I just wanted to give a quick kind of status update on where things are. So Dewberry is currently finalizing their impact assessment and data summary and providing those final products to Stantec. Stantec is then beginning to review and identify key data stories and other information to extract from those results to include in the plan. We have begun to compile the document mock-up, so kind of putting together what that document structure is going to look like. We have a document outline that was presented at the last full TAC meeting. And we're working on organizing that content and including it as in the plan as it's developed. We're also working with Dewberry to develop a mock-up of an update to the Web Explorer, so that is also ongoing. That will include updates to, of course, the impacts and also the projects and initiatives side of things. So that work is also currently ongoing. I know this is a pretty high-level update. We've talked extensively about the impact assessment in past meetings in terms of data inputs, data outputs, all of that, and that's kind of methodology that Dewberry has been running with, and now we're working to kind of summarize the findings. But does anybody have any questions about the impact assessment that I can answer before I move on? Okay, great. The other major piece that we're working on is, of course, the planned resilience actions analysis. So over the past year, really, we've been working on soliciting updated information about projects and initiatives that appear in the Web Explorer, things that are underway across the region or planned across the region to address flooding, primarily implemented by, supported by government at various levels. And then over the past couple of months, we've been following up with and been in touch with different project owners about those projects and initiatives, trying to fill gaps that where we know perhaps there's a project and initiative, trying to reach out and gather that information, both through kind of grouped meetings with local governments, but also through one-on-one outreach via email and phone to try to get the best possible information that we can into the system. So thank you, everybody who has worked with us on that. I know a lot of folks in the room have responded to our questions and helped us get that information up to date, so I appreciate that. We're now in the point where we have finished that data entry support and have finished our data quality improvement. The data quality improvement has primarily consisted of kind of going through the data to see where it might be possible to improve the contents. Things like if a project was, or if a record was indicated as a project, but we thought it would be better as an initiative, or if there was no cost information, or if perhaps the subtype was other, but we thought we could categorize it. We've gone through and made updates such as that to just clean up the data and make it more easy to analyze and present in the final plan. So now Stantec is working on analyzing the data, the findings, and they should have the analysis complete by early September, presented with the first draft of the plan. That analysis, I know I presented previously on kind of what that will include, but it includes things such as like total numbers in terms of number of projects and initiatives, but also dollar value across the region of things that we have in the Web Explorer. Geographic analysis of, high flood risk areas where we've identified no projects and initiatives, as well as potential opportunities for coordination. So thematically or geographically, are there any opportunities that we might want to call out to coordinate or opportunities for additional support? So we might be continuing to reach out to folks, particularly planning district commissions, over the next couple of months as we finalize this content, just to make sure that as we're presenting those gaps, that they truly are gaps and that what we're showing in the plan is reflective of what's happening on the ground. So we'll be back in touch if we have the content for you all to take a look at and react to. Are there any questions on the plan resilience actions analysis? No. Okay. All right. Well, those are all the updates I have today on the plan. I wanted to transition now to just kind of ground us again in the recommendations development side of things before we get into our collaborative group activity. So again, this is the key topic for our meeting today. What we're asking each subcommittee of the TAC, each of the 4 subcommittees to do is to identify your highest priority recommendations for action to improve mitigation of severe and repetitive flooding in the coastal region of Virginia in the next 4 years or with the next plan update. So those highest priority recommendations that you all come up with will be voted on by the full technical advisory committee for inclusion in a plan. That vote will happen at our meeting in November. Regardless of whether a recommendation leaves this conversation that we're having today or, made it into the conversation today from our previous discussions, it will be included as an appendix to the plan. So we're going to have an appendix to the plan that includes all of the recommendation ideas that have been brainstormed by the subcommittees to date. So even if something doesn't end up as the highest priority, it will still be included in the plan.
Recording in progress.
As you all work on prioritization today, please keep in mind whether or not the recommendation that you're contemplating is in line with the purpose of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, as well as the principles, but is it really in line with what we're trying to accomplish with the Coastal Resilience Master Plan? And also consider whether it's impactful, urgent, and feasible in the next 1 to 4 years or with the next plan update. DCR is embarking on developing the Virginia Flood Protection Master Plan, which we've talked about previously is the statewide state policy and programmatic strategy for state agencies to increase flood resilience across the Commonwealth. That will be occurring over the next year and several months through a highly engaged stakeholder process with state agencies. So you'll see in our discussions today where we've recommended actions be assigned to a particular implementing party. In some cases, we have recommended that happen from the Resilience Advisory Committee. So just as a reminder for those who maybe aren't familiar with the Code of Virginia on this subject, the Flood Resilience Advisory Committee is a new public body that has been deemed responsible to support development of the Flood Protection Master Plan moving forward. So we have suggested that because this new public body is coming into existence. So just wanted to share that reminder as you all think through the recommendations and how they might relate to that future planning process and that future public body. Before I turn it over to Lon to facilitate us through this discussion today, does anybody have any other questions, comments that they want to share before we get into it? No? Okay, great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Linda and the launch team who's going to take us through the rest of this meeting today. Linda, should I stop sharing my screen? This is
yeah, go ahead and stop.
okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I tried to join because we're going to do something virtual and in person, but that didn't work right. So sorry, I messed up your sound. I was trying a little bit ago. we have some really interesting work to do in the next hour. And we are going to talk about a little background, and then we're gonna jump into it, because you'll get to do what you would like to do with these recommendations that we started with. So what I would like to do first, before diving into that, is just giving you about 30 seconds to do a good brain game activity. And whenever you connect your right side of your brain to the left side of your brain, it really helps neurologically to help a person be calmer and to be more creative in their thinking. There's a lot of research behind this. So I'm going to give you, we call this either the gorilla thump or the butterfly hug, whichever you prefer, but it's going to be a cross brain activity. So all you have to do is put your palms out in front of you with your thumbs facing out, like this. And then you can cross your right arm over your left arm, and then hook your thumbs together. Okay, so now you've got your butterfly, or if you do it with this, it's gorilla. And then what you do is you bring it to just below your shoulders, the top of your chest. You alternatively thump, if you can. And if you do this and you breathe at the same time, you will notice that after a few seconds of doing this, the cortisol production in your body actually decreases, and you'll feel calmer. Pretty cool. So we're doing this just for the moment, because we need some creative thinking today when we talk about our different recommendations. So thank you for doing that with me. We have 3 stations today that combine the recommendations that you came up with last time and then went through the survey process. So each of the subcommittees was able to score these recommendations, and we are now providing you the top 10. In some cases, there was a tie for 10th place, and so there's a top 11, but for today's subcommittee meeting, there are 10 recommendations that we're going to be talking about. The stations today have themes to them. So there's 3 different stations. Station 1 will have 3 recommendations in it. Station 2 will have 2 recommendations. And station 3 will have 4 recommendations that you're going to work with. We're going to do something virtually at the same time that we're in person. So pretty soon, Cece will be screen sharing this virtual station for everyone virtually to talk about, while we here in the room get to walk around and go to any station that you'd want to. We're going to have half an hour to visit each of the 3 stations. And so in the room, you can time yourself. It's up to you when you move from station to station, and each one of the stations will have a facilitator to help you. Cece will be doing that facilitation on the virtual side. And Ian has his hand raised. What we're going to do when we're looking at these recommendations, we want you to be able to think about the general purpose of them. You don't need to wordsmith today. That's a really important point. Our goal today is to cull the 10 recommendations down to about 5. So we're going to have 30 minutes of looking at them in a little bit of detail, and then we're going to have 30 minutes of group discussion about what we're thinking in the first 30. When you get to your station in person or when you're looking online, the first thing you want to do is just take a look at the responsible party at the top for that particular recommendation. Who is it who's going to make sure that that recommendation comes to life? If you agree with it, you can put a check mark by it. If you have another suggestion or there's something else about it, you can write in there what it is you're thinking about that responsible party, the organization. Then, and this is the most important part, at every station, we're hoping that each one of you will have something that you can say in a bullet that will further develop that recommendation, bring it to life. Something that will help to clarify it. And so we'd like to ask each of you to add a bullet under the second area of that chart. And that's going to be the recommendation description. At the bottom of the chart, you'll see there's a comment section. In the room, you've got some sticky notes. On the sticky notes with the marker we gave you, if there's any comment, let's say you have an idea about this recommendation and what would be best to bring it to life, or let's say you think, no, this isn't a recommendation at all, you can put that in the comments of your sticky note. And that's all you have to do for each one of those, and then you can move on to the next station. You can have conversations with each other. The virtual group will be talking about any aspects that they see, but do try to focus, because it's only 30 minutes, go ahead and focus mostly on bringing that recommendation to life. What brief description would you give to it? And in the end, you might decide, hey, we need to combine a couple of these. That's why we put them at stations, because some of them seem like they would be similar. You'll be able to take that time to think through that for the next half an hour. Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Now, for the virtual members who've joined, when CC is screen sharing, you can type into chat if you have some things that you want to add for those bullets, or you can speak them out loud and she will be typing in what you're talking about. So it's good to give that verbal. If you were in the virtual sense, do have that verbal conversation as much as you can to get those bullets. We can do a quick mic check, but hopefully everyone is able to speak and we're able to hear you if you are a subcommittee member. And this, of course, for voting is just for the subcommittee members who are in the room or virtual. All others, we're happy that you're here and you're observing, and you'll have a chance about 20 minutes before the end. If you're a member of the public, we'll open it up for any comments that you might have. Okay. I think that's what we need to be able to get going. We'll start a little early.
Yeah, I just want to really encourage all the members to be thinking as you're going through this about the opportunity to combine, because ultimately we're taking maximum of 5 recommendations to the full TAC. So if you do think some of these recommendations are very similar and would be better combined, please have those conversations now during this exercise so that we can come away with this meeting. Our goal is to come away from this meeting with 5 recommendations that we feel good about refining, wordsmithing at our next meeting to be able to take to the full TAC.
And one more thing to add about our time in the next half an hour. We have a parking lot here in the room. The parking lot is over here on this chart. If you have an idea or a thought that's not directly related to the recommendations at hand, please put it on your sticky note and then put it up on the parking lot when you've gone through all the stations. And that way, if there's some other grand idea that is being born today, we are going to capture it. When it comes to the virtual, if you have a parking lot item, you can add that into the chat and we can capture it that way. And you can just call it parking and then put the idea down. When we are all back together, we've got that 30 minutes of discussion. After that, we'll have about 10 minutes to do voting. I'll tell you just a brief bit about voting right now. In the room, you're going to have little stickers to vote with, and you are going to be given 5 stickers. You can choose your top 5 recommendations. The similar, I should say, virtually, you don't have stickers, but you have the chat function. So when it's time to vote, I or CC will ask you to enter the number of that particular recommendation. We'll have them posted into the chat that you think should go forward, and you'll be able to choose those 5. Anyone have questions? Okay. So we'll get started with an extra 5 minutes on this end, and we'll see how the conversation goes and when we need to move forward. CC, you can go ahead and start sharing station 1 online with everyone. And in the room, facilitators, go ahead to your stations, and everyone who's a subcommittee member, please pick any station you'd like to. We want to split up among these stations when we start, but bring your sticky notes and your marker with you. CP, can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. So we have some good discussion here in this room. How did things go virtually?
Very well. In general, we went through each of the recommendations. There is one that really stands out but I know that DCR has provided some recommended revised text for, I'm looking for it now. That would be number 4, B11B. The original recommendation stated that it's still problematic that the CRMP and the CFPF are not directly connected. Using the CFPF to implement the CRMP or the VFPMP would go a long way towards getting buy-in. So we discussed that one for a couple minutes, and the need for some rewording and some clarification on what exactly that buy-in is for.
Run as soon as you can, go ahead and squeeze their top 10 recommendations. Everyone has a copy of that sheet in here. And that way we can, if we need to, we're gonna make adaptations to that sheet. Because we're virtual and in person, I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see if I write in person. So we're gonna see if Ezra will be able to type what we discussed. And you can go ahead and make all 10 show at once. So number 4 stood out, online anyway, virtual. If we talk through our stations here, we start with station 1. What came out from your group, Carolyn?
Yeah, I'll try to summarize and then folks jump in as needed to adjust. So I'm gonna start with A42A, I think it's number 1, and E12A. We spent some time talking about these two, how perhaps the idea of developing a clear purpose and goals for the plan can be tied to defining what resilient success looks like. So we came up with, develop clear plan, purpose, and goals, and define what resilient success looks like. We did talk about that resilient success as a term as objective, so that would need to be kind of clarified. And that it is appropriate to distinguish between what that means for state government versus local or regional government. And there were some ideas about how we could describe what those purposes are. As part of that, it was tied to P13A, which was very specific to project alternatives. We thought this recommendation could be made more broad to provide a framework for local and regional resilience planning, and then have the recommendation text become a subset of that overall recommendation.
So a rewording of, and that's number 7 here, rewording to say, provide a framework for local and regional resilience planning.
We did talk about number 4, use the community blood preparedness fund to implement CRMP. There were some ideas, refinements of what the description could be, but no changes to the text.
Okay. Let's see. If I want to make sure that what we're looking at on the screen is matching over here. Are you screen sharing the right file?
Lindsay, the one on there is the language that was initially drafted, so that the one that they saw on the stage was suggested. Okay, in that summary they received.
Okay, and then we just double check those numbers match.
Yeah, I do.
So B11B is number 4 over here, and then B13A is number 7 over here. Great. So with that suggestion, anything else that came up online virtually around station 1? So station 1 is looking at 4 recommendations. It's looking at number 3, number 4, number 7, and number 9. So right now we're talking about number 3, 4, 7, and 9.
And we did also have, we had discussion around the combination of number 9 and number 2. So B32A develop an initial needs assessment for coastal flood resilience, like exists for the wastewater or agriculture, and a process to update it as an element of the plan, and then also defining what resilient success looks like.
So it sounds like if there's more discussion, or if we can say, Carolyn, that one word change that you have, can we talk about that as a group for a second? And see if what is right now number 7, if the group would have consensus to be able to say, provide a framework for local and regional resilience planning. So Ezra, if you could, next to number 7 and before the letter B, go ahead and type those words. And that would be provide a framework for local and regional resilience planning. Yeah.
Do you want me to work? I could do a Word document here.
Yeah. Can you bring up the Word document? So you'll be able to screen share.
Were you having someone else screen share? I didn't quite follow.
Carolyn, are you able to screen share?
Yeah, I think why don't I screen share up here? It might be easier for us if we're too. Sure. It's easier to hear in the room, I think, sometimes there's less of a delay. So I won't have all of the text, but I'm just gonna write the words here. Just a second.
So is there any comment, in person or virtual, about that wording for number 7? Provide a framework for local and regional resilience plan.
And this is Rachel V. Mercy. I like that description much better.
Thank you, Rachel. And as we said, it's a little bit hard, right? Because you started with these words a few quarters ago. And what we're getting to now is going to be the concept. We want to keep the concept, but we want to give some chance to have final wordsmithing happen in Q4. So thank you, Rachel. Okay. So unless anyone has other suggestions, number 7 will now say this, and it will be including the concepts of the additional words that were there before. Great. Then we talked about, so online, you were talking about combining 9 and 2. Cece, did you have language, or anyone? Was there language for combining 9 and 2?
We did not wordsmith language, no.
Okay, so let's write down 9 and 2 as 2 concepts. I believe 2 is on which board, which station had number 2? I think it's over there. Are there?
Station 3.
Yes. Okay. 3.2. Okay. So, Cece, go ahead and read out loud what 9 is and what 2 is.
So 9 is define what resilient success looks like. And 2 is develop an initial needs assessment for coastal flood resilience, like that exists for wastewater or agriculture, and a process to update it as an element of the plan.
Okay. Try to do it quickly. So let's talk about that, combining those 2. So for the in-person room, do you see a way that those 2 concepts combine as one? 9 and 2. The wordsmithing doesn't have to be perfect, but the concept that by defining what resilient success looks like, you're also doing an initial needs assessment to be able to get to that, what resilient success looks like. Is that something that makes sense, or do you have comments?
Yeah, I think defining what resilience success looks like is rather broad as it relates to kind of this group. I mean, that's what this group's for, defining what resilience success looks like. I'd like to see it sort of be a little bit better defined, maybe. So from that perspective, yeah, it may make sense to merge those 2.
Does anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
I think that those can both kind of be nested within 7 as well, just because
you look at almost any basic framework for any sort of planning, a needs assessment is pretty high up on the list. And also, you know, defining your goals and how you know that you've met them is also pretty high on that list. So I think that those can sort of be nested within whatever broader framework ends up coming out.
So what do you all think about that? So it would be number 7, providing a framework for local and regional resilience planning. And that framework would include defining what resilient success looks like. And that framework would also include the initial needs assessment for coastal flood resilience. And then a process to update it as part of that framework.
And that also just accounts for differences in what resilience success looks like across localities.
I think it gives you the ability to sort of just get very specific in what you're defining that way.
Okay. Others in the room? We are combining all 3 together as a single concept. That you're making a framework for local and regional resilience planning, and it will include what 9 and 2 are conceding.
There was a comment that for collecting local and regional flood resilience plans for number 2. So that's like that same, you know, resilience planning.
So the same with the
Tying that
meeting for
framework
the,
together. Yeah.
anyone online? Can everyone unmute okay online?
Point of clarification. The resilience planning that we're talking about, this framework, is that in any way connected with the resilience plans needed for the CFPF funding?
I would throw that question back to the TAC. What's your recommendation?
Or could DCR staff, could we, are those the resilience plans that we're using to define this framework for Appendix F?
So right now, we are not, the local and regional resilience plans required by the CFPF exist kind of separately from this plan. There is not direct guidance from the Coastal Resilience Master Plan to localities for how to do that planning process. The principles are the same, some of the themes are the same, but currently those are not directly connected. So, you know, if we were to, that would be a new recommendation if the TAC wanted to make that recommendation.
Okay.
So I would just suggest, as you know, part of the conversation we had at my station regarding the number 9 and its connection to the one next to it. Linda, can you read that number on the one here? Yep.
Number 3, which is take temporal aspects into account when developing clear plans, purpose, and goals. And then clarify what the time span is expected to develop short, mid, or long term. And what does that do to our cost and investments long term?
So part of the conversation that I had with a couple of folks was around 9 and 3 was that there is a role for this plan related to both state agencies and to local planning, and for state agencies to also be using this document to make decisions. I think 7 and 9 differ, in my opinion, because 7 specifies that this is for local and regional planning, whereas 9 does not. So if we were to say we're rolling these together, I think potentially you would lose out on the plan as a resource for state agencies. I'm not advocating one way or another. I just want to acknowledge that that is, to me, when you read these, something that would be missed.
Ian had a comment to define metrics for measuring the initial resilience needs and assessing resilient project success. I don't know if he wants to elaborate.
Ian, do you want to elaborate on that?
One before comments for Carolyn, is the state flood plan that will be the framework for state agencies? How does that factor in with what we're doing with the CRMP? Those are 2 different things. So
yes, yeah, there are 2 different plans. I think the state plan will include forward-looking data and assessment for all forms of flood risk. So potentially that we could say, you know, that prioritization of needs would happen under the statewide plan and would not need to happen under the coastal plan. I think it will definitely be less place-based, So the types of data and products that we're gonna be putting out for the statewide plan are not going to be the same level of detail that you currently see in the Coastal Resilience Web Explorer in terms of being able to zoom into a particular location and say, here are the impacts on the ground necessarily. It'll be more of a kind of an index approach to looking at larger geographic scales for prioritization purposes. So that I think is the key difference, but you are correct, Ian, that the statewide plan is intended to help prioritize state resources when it comes to flood resilience across the entire.
And then with that,
So-
is it okay to have them, the local and regional, or I guess with your initial concern, try and the CRMP, oh my gosh, the Coastal Resiliency Master Plan wouldn't be able to help state agencies, but the state agencies would have the state flood plan later on to help inform them make decisions.
Potentially, yeah, and again, I don't want to advocate one way or another, I just wanted to reflect the conversation that happened, which was around the plan also potentially serving a role for the state.
So Ian, your point is that the state may get the information that they need later, or it'll involve the state with the flood resilience.
With the limited amount of knowledge I have of these two processes, yes. Or that's what I'm understanding.
So I would push back against any sort of, I guess, decision to exclude, like, it's not a local plan, it's not a regional plan. Localities and regions have not much to do with it aside from, participation on the TAC. It's a state plan. It can help localities and regions do their own planning work, but at its core, it's a plan being developed by the state. And I think we lose that part of this discussion if we say that, oh, we're only going to say that it's for local localities and regions. I think we're really missing the boat there.
And so Annette does get towards wordsmithing. However, it's important because the concept will change, right? Change those words. So better to go to your suggestion, if we didn't have the words local and regional in there and it said provide a framework for resilience planning and then put everything under it, well, you included local and regional and state. Is that more what you're thinking?
Well, I mean, it sounds like one of the what's being proposed is to net 9 and 2 under 7, and I kind of feel like 9 actually. We still have to have that real discussion about what we're trying to do. How would we've been languishing out there for years.
Okay.
So I would say, like, we need to figure out what we're trying to do in cover 9. What are our goals with this planning work? And then other things will follow from that. I think removing local, regional, or adding in state to that local, regional, and state resiliency planning, and having an initial needs assessment as part of that. I know there's another recommendation over here about surveying. What was it?
Number 8.
8. That could be tied together, I think, with number 2. Those, to me, seem like they would be good to pair together.
Okay. And so by adding the word state in number 7, as we're making this one aggregated recommendation, is that something that would work? If you, is anyone opposed to adding the word state in number 7 there to say provide a framework for local, regional, and state resilience planning? That sound okay? Okay. Carolyn, you want to add the word state in number 7? And now we have 4 recommendations that for now are together. Let's move on here and let's talk a little bit about the remaining 6. Recommendation number 3 is a temporal aspect recommendation. And we're thinking about combining it with E23B, which is number 1. So if we were to do, and Carolyn, if you don't mind, put a space between after 8 and 3, because we're thinking about that grouping. And then we'll be able to show number 3 and number 1 as one possible combining recommendation. Anyone have comments about that? Number one is considered forward-looking future conditions data for all components of flood risk, hazard exposure vulnerability. Examples include sea level rise, precipitation frequency, projected growth, demographic changes, etc. So focusing on the forward-looking future conditions data, which is a temporal piece, as well as number three, the temporal aspect of both. Anyone have comment about combining those two together?
So I thought that number three was more concerned with, the planning and implementation process. Next steps, what follows what it comes to making decisions. Whereas number one is more about, it's a lot more concerned with the things that the research data and innovation group have been talking about. I would not, I know they're both conserve time, but I don't think I would recommend combining those two.
Anybody else have thought? There's agreement with Ben, I think.
I think you could lump three into under seven. That would be part of the framework plan.
Can
I agree
three
with
go
Ben.
in the? Say again?
Oh, I agree with Ben.
Three could go above. Anyone have comment if we put three above with that other grouping? Those could work together. Okay. Let's take those together. And now we still have number one, and that's fine. Go ahead and just hit enter and let's put number 4 up there, which is use the community flood preparedness fund to help implement the CRMP or the Virginia Flood Protection Master Plan to improve buy-in. And there's an alternative wording here, develop a funding source for the CRMP and for the Virginia Flood Protection Master Plan. Any thoughts about that? So that one's all around funding, right? That's the general concept for that. And what we're trying to get to in the next 7 minutes is to have a defined set of these that you can be voting on if they are to be defined at all, or we can leave them separate. So any other comments for number 4 in terms of what you wanted to expand it to or connect it to? Anyone from the virtual group?
This is Rachel. I think that maybe we don't have to say, I think maybe we could, so the problem is we have these two processes that are covering very similar things, but are not connected in concept. And I think what we're trying to get here is to ensure that the concepts within both of those processes align. And so although a funding source would be great, we're not always going to have a funding source for our, for our planning, and we should still plan anyway. But at least our funding sources and our planning should try and align as much as possible.
So it's really about aligning funding sources and planning.
I think I sort of mentioned that in my sticky note under the just like recommendation description.
Okay. Yeah. So CFPF project applications are considered partially on a basis of alignment with the CFPF. The funding alignment between the plans.
So Rachel, I think, I think your point about not always having funding available is certainly reflects reality. I think one thing that we can push for with this plan is to establish dedicated funding. That if this work, if we think it needs to be done, then pushing the, the legislature and the executive branch to assign that, the level of funding that's necessary follows from that, right? But we don't actually have that funding source yet. The CFPF is an imperfect, it's not directly connected. It would be great to have them better aligned, but knowing kind of that the CFPF is itself kind of in a little bit of a purgatory right now in terms of, how stable its funding is going to be moving forward. Establishing some other, dedicated source of funding to implement the plan, I think is gonna be critical to make sure it's not a waste of time.
Aligning funding to the plan. So, and we have just about 4 minutes right now. So those two recommendations right now are separate. If you just put a line in between 1 and 4, and then we're gonna go on and let's take a look. We're going to add in here number 5. And so we've connected 2, 8, and 9, and 7. 1 is separate and 4 is separate for now. Do you want, if you have that as a general statement for number 4, we can add it to that, like align funding with planning? Or should we leave it as it is for now?
I think put a sticky note on there about establishing. Well, one would be to either say that, you know, the CMPF should be the source of funding, or to establish another source of funding for the master plan.
So the idea then, we can wordsmith that piece next quarter, but it's about in some way aligning funding and planning,
I
yes?
think it's fine for where we are right now.
Okay. And then, so 5, we have, and we also have, go ahead, Carolyn, and type the rest of them in there if you can. We're going to take a look also, so number 10 in station 2. Were there any comments in general about the 4 recommendations for station 2 from the virtual group? PC or anyone, was there anything you wanted to mention when you talked about those 4 recommendations for station?
Our conversation primarily was around the responsible parties for those recommendations. We didn't have a whole lot of additional description or contextual conversation. Other than everyone always wants more data.
Is there anything you wanted to mention from this station?
One of our, one comment that was repeated by a couple of people was that this one we might want to consider dropping. Because there's so much survey information already going on, and there's a certain amount of survey fatigue that is felt out there, so that was one. And then,
That's number 10, so when you're voting, if you want to drop it, you want to vote for it.
yep. And then if it is retained, it was suggested that we also bring in other state agencies, construction investors, that, you know, if a rural area has a lot of interface with the extension people, with the Department of Forestry, they might be good to survey.
I know, yeah, we're gonna move forward. So we have 5, 10, 6. Were there any other ones up there, Carolyn, that we still need to add?
I think that's all of them.
Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's all.
So what we can do, if you can shrink your screen a little bit so you can see all of them at once.
Don't, folks in the room won't be able to read.
Okay. So one grouping, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we actually right now have 6 recommendations that we can choose from. Because you were able to combine so many in the first grouping, you have the first grouping, which will be 2, 9, 7, and I believe it's 3, yeah. And 8. 2, 9, 7, 3, and 8 are combined as one. And then you have number 1, number 4, number 5, number 10, and number 6. Was there any more combining of 1, 4, 5, 10, and 6 that anyone suggested?
We're taking 5 out of this.
We get to choose 5 today, yeah. Everyone gets to choose 5 today. 1 and 8.
Yeah.
So, I got the 1.
So I think you could possibly take 2 and 10, where you're doing a needs assessment that also includes a needs assessment for data.
I agree.
Combining 2 and 10? Where the survey part could be combined into number 2. Correct?
Combine 2 and 10?
Combine 2 and 10. So, and Rachel, is it okay to say 10 as part of 2 up in that first grouping? Or do you want to see 2 and 10 together as a separate recommendation?
Yeah, I think we could put 10 with the first grouping. That's gonna make it a giant goal, but they're all similar concepts.
Okay, and for now, that's gonna work well, because you've got next quarter to finalize the wordsmithing on that. And it just means there'll be a lot of words to put together. So take a look at this right now as a subcommittee. You have the first grouping. Then you have 1, 4, 5, and 6, which would allow you to have 5 recommendations moving forward. Is there anyone who has any comment about that? Could these be your 5 recommendations? And you don't have, I will say that you don't have to have 5. If there's some on there that you want to drop completely, you're allowed to do that. 3 to 5 was the original goal.
I will say please keep in mind that these have to go to the full TAC also to be voted on. The longer and the more that's in an individual recommendation, potentially you could open it up to not, somebody not liking a particular piece of that recommendation and then not wanting it to move forward because of, if it is too long and there's one part that somebody doesn't like. So just keep that in mind procedurally how things are going to work.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, I think at the next meeting, when we start wordsmithing that first large goal, we'll also have to consider how will this new goal look any different than our last master plan? So the last master plan was, some of this work was supposed to have been established then. And so are we building off of that? And again, it sounds like we can talk about that next time.
I think that's a great point in terms of just, I wouldn't want to make it too ambitious based on what's been planned previously. It's like, let's make sure this is something that you guys are gonna be able to attack. And there's not really a need to put forth a goal that you're not even gonna be able to use. Just for it to linger over to the next administration,
Yeah, we don't want to keep doing the same thing every 5 years or 4 years.
We wouldn't want to combine all 10 into one, right? You want to have something.
Right, and I would say, I think this is a great list, but you guys are gonna have to drill down a little bit more, I think, get some more specificity out of this. This is a good start, for sure.
Yeah, and I just want to say in terms of what is going in the plan and what happens with these recommendations. So the recommendations will appear in the plan as an action statement with responsible parties and with whatever description the TAC comes up with and what gets voted for approval. From there, implementation of those recommendations is another thing. And we're not going to be able to figure out exactly how all of these get implemented now. But the expectation is that the Office of Resilience Planning does work to advance, working with others where appropriate, the recommendations that appear here in the plan where we can.
Okay, so how do you feel about, as a group, about not voting personally on these, but that we choose these 5, one big grouping, and then the other is a singular at the moment to move forward? Does anyone want to go ahead and vote to look at how one grouping or one item for a recommendation stands above another? Okay. I'll just ask, I'll ask for a vote on voting. So if you would like to do voting, I'm gonna do it virtually and in person. Say aye.
Are we making an official motion? You wanna make the motion?
I guess,
We can.
can we do that?
Is that our goal today, is to have the blank piece?
Our goal today is just to choose 5, you don't have to rank them. So if you would like to have some ranking of them because it helps you, we can go ahead and vote where you're ranking them.
Yeah, at our next meeting, we will vote officially. There will be a vote on each of the recommendations. Do you agree with it or do you not agree with it moving ahead to the full TAC? Right now, what we're trying to do is get enough consensus on 5 recommendations for us to discuss at that meeting, so that at our next meeting, we've got a starting point to have the ability to wordsmith and ultimately at the end of that meeting, have that vote move forward. And hopefully the TAC is not, we would love to have 5 recommendations that everybody feels great about coming out of that meeting and not be voting down certain recommendations at the end of that meeting, if possible.
I think that voting now ahead of like actually refining them kind of does us a disservice, personally.
I agree. I think a consensus point of view here is better to continue working towards refining our language.
I would agree with that.
Because they can be refined around each of them.
Well, that's wonderful. So then you've done a fantastic job today to get a handle of what each of these are and figure out how they can interact with each other. And so we'll take these 5 forward. We'll be giving them back to you and we'll be refining them when we meet again for Q4 so that you can finalize those. And of course, giving you some time to think about them in advance. And even if someone has ways to combine them, you can think about that and be able to bring that forward at some point. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any final comments about the recommendations development or questions about the process before we move to public comment?
Are we going to station 3?
To talk about station 3? We have a couple minutes to do that, sure. So within station 3, there are 2 recommendations. One is number 2 that has been combined up there, and the other one is number 6. So number 6 is if they're going to plan action, establish state staff consultancy program to reach out to local government to identify if they are not interested in actions or what factors that funding and support development those actions. And so around that, some of the comments, what constitutes those like that? And what format or levels could an outreach effort look like? And another comment, establish state program with staff to provide technical assistance to localities or fund the planning district commissions to do the same. Is there anything you want to add, Helen, to that?
No.
Thank you. And is there anything that you came up with in station 3 online for the virtual component? Cynthia, is there anything for station 3?
No. Again, we talked more about the responsible party than we did any of the recommendation changes.
Okay.
Can someone correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't localities required to have like a resilience section of their comprehensive plan now? Like as per state code?
That is only required for some localities. I believe it's only those in the coastal zone. I think. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what's good. There was I think there was proposed legislation to make it a requirement across the board, but I do not think it passed last session.
Great, so we will move these 5 recommendation concepts forward. The first one being a grouping. We'll talk more about it. We're okay.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we are going to move to public comment.
Grace Rogers would like to speak.
Wonderful. Grace?
Hi, everyone. Grace Rogers. I'm a manager with Environmental Defense Fund's Climate Resilient Coasts and Watersheds team in Virginia. Really appreciated getting to listen in on the discussion today. And just had a couple of thoughts I wanted to flag and highlight for folks, given our engagement with the 2021 Coastal Resilience Master Plan and also engagement in similar planning processes in North Carolina and in Louisiana. So I think the first big kind of overarching comment is there's been some discussion today around what does resilient success look like? And I think that really kind of gets to the need for very tangible and clear metrics that can be set, that need to be set up and are currently not in place in the pre-existing plan and haven't really been a part of these discussions in a concrete fashion. Because without clear metrics, it's impossible that really articulate and define what we're trying to achieve here. It's impossible to see if we're going to be able to be successful or not. So kind of thinking of like SMART goals for resilience planning. We don't have a clear goal right now. The 6 principles that are laid out, that have been laid out by the administration for this work are, I think, more statements of intent and less specific around what is actually supposed to be measured and tracked in resilience projects and through these plans. So I just would really urge more discussion around tangible metrics, ecosystem metrics, infrastructure metrics, community health, and social vulnerability and things like that, but real tangible metrics to be able to formulate a picture of what success could look like here. And then going back to the connection between the planning and the funding, I think, we've seen in the past, there's been challenges with localities not being able to participate because they don't have the capacity in adding projects into the project database. Being able to make a clear connection between the project prioritization process that is going to lay out which projects are included in a master plan, and then demonstrating to localities that there is then a connection if you do the work to upload your projects and make sure that they, are considered good projects based on these metrics that are created. It gives localities more of an incentive because if there is a connection with the funding. So just would strongly urge, I know that there's a lot of discussion on the wording, and it could get modified, but I think that connection is really important because there's no incentive right now for localities to participate. And it doesn't really make sense for the Commonwealth to have one set of processes or analysis for the CFPF, but then that to not be mirrored in the plans. And I don't, very open to folks' thoughts. And I know it was brought up earlier, like the CFPF process may not be perfect, but it doesn't make sense for there to be 2 separate processes relating to resilience. They should be similar and have overlap, just to make it easier for localities as well. So those are kind of our 2 big thoughts, but I'm really happy to engage with staff and the TAC further on this, and happy to provide any feedback or information if you're interested in learning more about how this is working in Louisiana and North Carolina as well. Thanks.
And I think you also had a comment about the local planning that you put in the chat. She just noted that it was a recommendation, not a requirement.
Got it. Yep. Anyone else for a public comment?
Nobody else asked to speak.
Okay. All right.
Other than hand raised.
That's just my my clicker turns into a hand, and I have it over people's faces. All right, I'm just gonna pull up the slides again quickly so we can talk about next steps. Okay, so we are going to take the recommendations that have been discussed. We're going to share those with the full TAC at our next meeting on September 18th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. All of the subcommittees will be presenting the work that they're doing in these meetings in the next week at that meeting. So you'll also have a chance to see what the other subcommittees are putting forward, an opportunity for us to think about how the recommendations across subcommittees are or are not working together. I'm just realizing I'm not sharing my screen for you all. I apologize. There we go. So that discussion will be happening in September, and then again, we will have our next meeting. It is already scheduled on the calendar, so hopefully you have that invitation. If you do not, please let me know. It's scheduled for October 8th, again, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. At that meeting, we'll be refining, wordsmithing those recommendations that we just saw on the screen, getting to a good place where we feel good about the wording there, hopefully, and then all voting on the subcommittee recommendations. That will be a formal vote, so each organizational member of the TAC will be asked to cast a vote formally for the record, and then those will be moved on. Those that receive a majority vote will be moved on to the full TAC meeting. Our final full TAC meeting is also already scheduled November 13th. At that meeting, we will review all of the recommendations across all subcommittees and again vote on their inclusion in the plan. So again, each organizational member of the TAC will be voting on all subcommittees' recommendations, so not just your own, but every other subcommittee, for whether or not those go into the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. And then, of course, we have our plan to be released at the end of the calendar year, so something to look forward to there. And that's everything I've got. Are there any final questions or comments?
Just a question on the timeframe to finalize the recommendations. Is the plan to, we're gonna review all of those, what we just came up with in the next subcommittee meeting?
Yes.
And the plan is to finalize, kind of carve out and etch out what those recommendations will be in that.
Exactly. Yeah, we're gonna take notes, the conversation that happened from this meeting. Try to bring to you all not just the recommendation language itself, that verb oriented statement, but also responsible party, other details, so that we can kind of all agree on that and then again vote on those recommendations for the next meeting. So our next meeting will also be highly collaborative. So gonna try to keep the DCR updates very short so that we can spend the vast majority of the time working on that wordsmithing, and then voting.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah. We'll need
Everyone,
time.
everyone should plan the next meeting to come prepared to, you know, bring their thoughts and ideas and really, etch out what these recommendations should be for you, the way you want them to look, the way you want them to read. But these are gonna go up to the legislators potentially, for the bill, so.
Yes.